floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, and also thank you to the co-panelists in the session earlier today, because I have to say, even though I'm presenting a climate action plan here, it's so nice to learn from the climate action plans that I'm listening to, and also the practices. I learned quite a bit in that last presentation, so I really appreciate it. That's also to say that I'm certainly not standing here to say that this is what a climate action plan should be, and you should all replicate that. This is what we do and the way that we look at it, and that is purely what I'll say is my disclaimer there. The other thing to mention is I'm the head of sustainability for Booking.com. We're part of the Booking Holdings Group, and this is a climate action plan for the entire Booking Holdings Group, so including Booking, Agoda, Kayak, OpenTable, Priceline. And so we work on it collectively. Booking, of course, is a large part of that group, so we are driving a lot of the effort. But I speak on behalf of the group when I say that. And then the last thing I'd love to say is that before I took my role as the head of sustainability, my core responsibility was actually developing this plan. So it's really nice to be here today to talk about it. It feels like a lovely moment. I did not start my timer. Going into our climate action plan, and I'm not sure it's connected. If you would like to go to the next slide for me. Great. So as we've heard, we take a similar approach to creating our climate action plan. It is really rooted in the Paris Agreement and making sure that we're striving towards our global commitments. It's in line with science and leading us to ensure that we meet our goals to be under that 1.5 degrees Celsius target of warming. It is really important that we not only recognize the impact that our industry has on climate, but also the impact that climate has on our industry. So we very much see this as a core mechanism to make sure that we can continue in our industry and continue against our mission of making it easier for travelers to experience the world. That is something that we need to ensure we do for the sake of our industry, and that's how we approached our climate action plan. Great, it works. I'd like to say that our climate action plan is also a core part of our sustainability strategy. So we developed our sustainability strategy a few years ago, and the climate action plan is a subset of that. So that means that they are completely linked together. Our climate action plan mirrors the strategic pillars that we have. And what we decided to do was, because we are a tech player, our footprint and the way that we interact with the industry is quite unique. So we have direct operations, of course, but we also have influence in the industry that goes far beyond our direct control. And it was important for us to take that into account with our climate action plan and our sustainability strategy. Therefore, we have 3 commitments within it. The first commitment is relatively simple. We commit to operating our business sustainably and building a culture of sustainability. What this means is that we'll lead by example, we'll set targets in line with climate science, but we'll also make sure that within our business we're creating a culture that ensures that employees are acting with sustainability and climate in mind in their day-to-day work. That also means that our employees and our business is preparing to create our climate action plan of the future. This is the climate action plan of today, but if we don't build that culture, we won't improve that in the future. So that's already baked in to our approach to make sure that we have something more ambitious in a couple years' time and we continue to expand. The second piece is to commit to make it easier for travelers to make more sustainable travel choices. We want to highlight lower carbon options on our platform and make sure that travelers are finding them not only easily, but they're finding them attractive and they're finding them in line with the other parameters of their trip. That's our core role as an organization. We're a marketplace. So we need to make sure that we're making those choices attractive to the travelers. That also means that we have to make it easier for accommodations or other travel providers to actually provide those options. So we have a core role in creating that ecosystem and creating that flywheel between the two. The third is a commitment to collaborating to decarbonize the travel industry. We, of course, can't do it alone. We are a small part that does have a large impact in the industry, but we need to rely on others in the ecosystem to create this dynamic. There are barriers to decarbonization, for instance, in aviation, that we are probably not best positioned to put forward, but we are positioned well to make sure that they're amplified and multiplied, and so that's what we aim to do. Zooming specifically into our net zero target, this is one of the ways that we measure that first pillar of operating sustainably. We used a 2019 baseline as well, and in 2022 we set our targets and committed to the Science Based Targets Initiative, and my peer over here shared a lot about that, so I won't go into the details there, but that was a really interesting process for us to better understand our emissions, to understand what actually sits within scope, what sits in scope 3, but also what sits beyond scope 3, and thinking through how we want to address those as well. With that, we have near-term targets and our net zero target. So by 2030, we aim to reduce our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 95% compared to our 2019 baseline. By 2030, we aim to reduce our Scope 3 emissions by 50%. And it's important to note that those emissions include things like our offices and data centers that run our tech platforms, of course, our purchased goods and services. But because we're a platform, our travel from the travelers that book on our platform and accommodations or travel providers doesn't sit within that Scope 3. So it's really important that we think through ways to actually drive reduction there. Just because it's not part of our emissions in the greenhouse gas reporting protocol doesn't mean our responsibility ends there. And I think that that's really important to keep in mind. It doesn't mean that that's your only boundary for action. Then finally, by 2040, we aim to be net zero. That's in line with the new net zero standard. That means that we'll reduce our gross emissions by 90% across Scope 1, 2, and 3, and then we'll use carbon removals to mitigate the unmitigated emissions. And again, it's important that we're really in line with climate science there and the highest standard. The net zero standard was only released a couple years ago, but it's certainly important for us to follow and make sure that we're in line with. To speak a little bit to the progress that we've made in the last couple years, really proud to share some of these milestones. At the end of 2022, we reported a reduction of 80% in our Scope 1 and 2 emissions. Our Scope 1 and 2 emissions are primarily from our offices, I have to say. This came from the purchasing of renewable energy. It also came from the shift to our new offices that are BREEAM certified for creating renewable energy with solar panels and ensuring that our footprint is reduced there. Obviously, we're well on our way with that. That means that as we make our way through that target, we can focus on where we can have additional impact. In 2023, we launched Climate Awareness and Education Program for all of the employees at Booking Holdings, so across all of our brands for employees and leadership. And what that does for us is that creates a common language and understanding across our entire organization. So as we push climate targets across our organization and climate commitments, everyone knows what we're talking about. And it makes influencing our leadership, influencing our employees, or influencing our leadership of the future much easier and much more effective. So that's been really critical for us, and we're going to continue to build that in the coming couple of years. Looking to our second commitment of making it easier for travelers to make more sustainable travel choices, we now have more sustainable offerings available across all of the verticals on our platform, particularly lower emission options. So travelers can now find EV electric vehicles. They can find lower tagged flight options. Public transport is available in a number of cities. And for accommodations, we label more sustainable accommodations through certifications or their practices across a variety of indicators. Our climate action plan and our strategy are linked. I said that already. So while we, of course, are focusing on environmental indicators, it is also important that we have holistic metrics in mind as well. So we do that too. Beyond that, more than 1.3 million accommodations have now shared their sustainability practices with us. That gives us so much data to understand what barriers we have to unblock for the accommodations industry. So with that, we can share that not only with accommodations back themselves, but destinations, who we've heard some things from today, to understand how we can target and block the barriers that they're facing. So that's something we're looking into in the future. On the last commitment to collaborate to decarbonize the travel industry, one exciting thing to share, and we celebrated a bit yesterday, but we just launched with UN Tourism online courses for all accommodations across 4 key areas, but one of them being greenhouse gas and energy management. And this is one of the ways that we're trying to upskill accommodations to make sure that they know how to make progress on this as well. And of course, we can look to peers who can share much more inspiration on this and speak to accommodations directly. But one of our roles reaching a broad range of accommodations is making sure that we're also providing this resource that they're asking for as well. So these are some of the ways that we've progressed against the various commitments of our climate action plan, ranging from our direct operations all the way to our sphere of influence and the way that we're looking at it. So thank you very much.